Hello everyone, this is Tom with just a quick message before tonight's Strange and Deadly show. Now, you know us, Chris and I, we like to make the show sound good. We don't just record something and then throw it on a track and put it out there. We like to take the time to make sure it sounds good. There's a lot of podcasts competing for your time these days, so why should you waste your time with something that doesn't sound good? One of the things that maybe slowed the Strange and Deadly show down a bit was taking the time to do that, making sure it was edited and so on. Now, recently, we both invested a lot of money in new equipment that would take a lot of time out of the workflow and actually, hopefully, make things sound better as well. So it was a bit of a win-win situation, but as is often the case when you get new technology, it's something that you need to get to grips with, and occasionally a little technical hitch might happen because it's a new thing and you've not foreseen it. Now that happened tonight, so unfortunately in tonight's Strange and Deadly show, Chris's track is a bit off through no fault of his own. It's just something that we overlooked, but for next time we won't overlook it. So if this is your first time listening to the Strange and Deadly show, please be reassured that it doesn't always sound this way. It's usually nice and crisp and clear. But unfortunately, once you've recorded a whole show, we just haven't got the time to go back and record the whole thing over again. So we'll put it out this time, but we've learned our lesson with what went wrong, and we will make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's all from me. I hope you can still enjoy tonight's Strange and Deadly show.
Ding, 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 da-dong. Great music, that, isn't it? By the great Danny Davis. Well, welcome to the Strange and Deadly show. This is a podcast dedicated to the Section 3 list, a selection of films related to Britain's video nasties. We put these films based on a theme, of course, and then discuss and review them for your and hopefully our entertainment. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Apple's own iTunes, of course, Spotify, Stitcher, or any good podcatcher. Or any good podcatcher you may choose to use. And you can find more information about us and the other shows we have available, including Us in the Omniverse, our show all about comic book movies, on our network over at strangeanddeadly.com. So there you go. There's the admin done. And here we are. My name, of course, is Mr. Chris Clayton. I can still hear that music tinkling away in the background there. If I had time, we could listen to it tinkle out together, couldn't we? But such is technology, that I can hear these things now as they happen. I'd love to have played some disco music or something like that, perhaps have a little dance with you, but we haven't got bloody time. There's work to be done. There's a mission ahead of us. Summer's gone now, pretty much, so I'm not recording nude anymore. I was in the past. You didn't know that, though, did you? Hey, bloody perverts, listen to a man recording nude. You should have known. Hey, you should have heard it flapping away, but you didn't. What does that say about you? It doesn't say anything about me because I just stay silent about it. It says everything about you. Complicit in your I can't even speak English. Complicit you were in your actions. So here we are once again with another episode of the Strange and Deadly show. We've got a good rhythm going on. My diction is terrible. It really is. I can't get the words out properly anymore. I'm supposed to be a radio broadcaster. I was once tipped to be one of the hot ones. Not like a hot wing or something like that, or perhaps a bottle of hot sauce, but a hot one of the greats to have come along. But that was about 10, 15 years ago now. And now I'm just one of the ones that people look at and go, oh, that's a shame, isn't it? What happened there? He could have been one of the greats, but here he is now bumming it on this bloody show. But look, we're in a rhythm. We're here. I'm Chris Clayton. I said that before. Who am I joined by?
This is Tom Elliott, and we have a couple of Killer Kids films this time, Chris. Interesting. It's going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
I think it will be. I mean, I said that the youth is the future on the last episode. Not this bloody youth, Tom. The deviants they are. This is why I haven't procreated, because I don't want to create this sort of evil, this sort of malevolence that's available here.
It's possible. And I think that's what probably would happen. So, good choice.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I hope you've been well. I know you've got a few things coming up in the future. You've got a Twilight Zone event to go to, haven't you? So that's going to be fun for you to go out there and meet some of the fans.
Yeah, heading over to New York at the beginning of October and meeting some Twilight Zone fans. Probably a bit of a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Hope not, but could be. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, I think you'll get invited back. Although I'm going to phone up immigration, mate, and say, look, don't let this guy in. I know what he's been up to.
Yeah, just listen to this podcast.
If you listen to this, they'll actually stop you and say, no, somebody like you is supposed to be decent, hang around with somebody like him. We can't let you in. But no, I'm sure it'll be a great time. I can't wait to see all the pictures and hear about all the stories of you handing out your little Twilight Zone cards with a bonus podcast, and that's going to be great. I'm not doing anything, Tom.
I'm sure you'll do something, mate. You know.
No, I'm just going to sit here and masturbate. That's all I feel like doing at the moment.
You know, there's worse ways to spend your days, so...
Well, you say that, Tom, but you try walking around with a saw helmet. It's not fun. It's not fun for me, and it wouldn't be fun for you either. But, Tom, forget about all of that. We've got a double bill, a really interesting double bill here. Two films that, I had seen one of them before, but are these both new to you?
Both new to me. I'd heard of one of them, not the other one. And I guess... tonight we'll find out whether that's because it deserves its obscure status or not. But I'd heard of Alice, Sweet Alice. I'd never heard of it referred to as Communion. But yeah, I'd heard of Alice, Sweet Alice.
Well, we'll talk a bit about that, how you may have heard of it in the past and how I came to see it in the past. It's been around for a while. But the other one's called, so the first one is called Communion, of course. You kind of said it there. The second one is called Dead Kids. Now, you type Dead Kids into Google, Tom, and, it ain't looking good for you. You've got to follow it up with the other title of the movie, which is Strange Behavior. Otherwise, it just looks like you're looking for dead kids, and I think you're going to be arrested for something like that.
It doesn't look good.
It doesn't, does it? It doesn't. So why don't I crack on, Tom, like cracking an egg into a bowl, like the Delia Smith of podcasting, they called me. Nobody's called me that. Supports a shit football team, for starters, wouldn't be considered that way. I'm just rambling, Tom. It's not doing anyone any favours, is it, at all? Why don't I crack on and tell you about Communion then?
Please do.
Okay, I'm going to do just that. So it was released in 1976. That's when you were born, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. See, I remembered that.
Well done.
1976, the birthing of Tom Elliott. There it is. This film's also known as Alice, Sweet Alice, of course, as Tom and I both said, directed by Alfred Sole, a shoemaker, because he's surnamed Sole, Tom. Eh?
Yeah.
Stars Linda, don't say anything. It stars Linda Miller, Paula Shepherd, Mildred Clinton, Bill Clinton's wife, that is, Tom, Niles McMaster, Brooke Shields, and many more. And let me give the synopsis of this one. Catherine Spages is having trouble with her daughter, Alice. She's a single mother having to raise Alice alongside her sister, Karen. Alice is jealous of Karen, always being doted upon, seemingly her mother's favourite. The two girls are attending the St. Michael's Parish School and, under the guidance of Father Tom, are to receive their first communion. Father Tom, right? Sounds familiar. Alice plays tricks on Karen, wearing a yellow raincoat with a porcelain mask to scare her and stealing her doll. It's the day of the communion and Alice is nowhere to be seen. As the congregation prepares to greet the girls and Karen readies herself, a mysterious figure wearing the same yellow raincoat and mask strangles Karen to death and then places her inside a wooden coffin. They chuck a match inside and burn the body. Alice soon appears clutching a yellow raincoat and her sister's veil. How did she get the item and where did she get it from? Her Aunt Annie picks up on this development and soon creates a distrust towards Alice, who may have been the last person to see her sister alive. As Catherine comes to terms with her daughter's death, her estranged husband, Dom, visits to help her through it. An investigation begins into the death of Karen, with much of the suspicion focusing on Alice, a troubled young girl who appears to show little emotion over her sister's death. Soon another incident happens when Annie is attacked on the stairwell, being stabbed repeatedly in the foot and leg by someone wearing the yellow raincoat and mask. She swears it's Alice, though Alice claims that it's actually Karen back from the dead. This tale of the mysterious stalker carries on as it claims several more victims. The sleazy landlord of the apartment block in which Catherine resides is suspicious and clearly a pervert. But who is doing the killings? Could it be Alice or someone else seeking to put the blame on her?
Now remember, Alice, I want you to say no to every car. I want you to lie. To the 6?
No.
The 4?
No.
It was the 6, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now we know it's working. Do you know for sure who stabbed your aunt?
No.
Did you stab your aunt?
No.
During your entire life, did you deliberately hurt someone who trusted you?
I put Debbie's coat in the toilet, if that's what you mean. But I didn't lie. I told the sister I did it.
Now, please, Alice, answer yes or no.
Yes.
In the suitcase found in the basement were a white dress and a mask. Are they yours?
Yes.
Are you deliberately withholding any information regarding the attack on your aunt?
No.
Do you know who stabbed your aunt?
No.
Do you know who stabbed your aunt?
Yes, it was Karen. I told him it was Karen, but no one believed me. It was Karen.
All right. So, Tom, I had mentioned on the previous episode, in fact, may have been at the beginning of this one as well. I can't remember because I've rambled a load of bollocks as I usually do, that I've seen this movie before. And where I saw it, and I'm wondering if maybe this is where you perhaps heard the name, is on the old Horror Channel.
Okay.
Sky Television. Now, I remember watching. Now, I haven't watched the Horror Channel in a long time. Is it still called the Horror Channel? Because at one point it was called Zone Horror, wasn't it?
I believe it's the Horror Channel now. Whether it's went back and forth, I'm not too sure.
Right. So I can't remember if it was called Zone Horror first, then the Horror Channel, or if it was the Horror Channel, then Zone Horror, then back to the Horror Channel again. Anyway,
yeah, Zone Horror's a shit name, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah, but I think there were a bunch of different Zone channels at the time.
There was, yeah.
It slotted into that, but I'm sure it was just called the Horror Channel when I first saw it, and this was when it first started, and I was really excited about the fact that there was this, Sky Television channel that was going to be dedicated to horror movies. They used to show Alice Sweet Alice on there a lot, which is how I came to see it. They used to show films like Bloody Birthday, Bloody Murder, which was like a Jason ripoff kind of movie, Friday the 13th ripoff movie. They used to show a bunch of different stuff. Often they would show them cut, which I wasn't super fond of. But I saw Alice Sweet Alice a couple of times because what I used to do is I remember sitting down and watching the whole thing through from back to front. And then now and again, I would have the channel on and I'd be playing on like a Game Boy Color or something like that, or a Game Boy Advance. And I would just have the channel on.
Right.
So it would be on in the background and sometimes the film would show. Is that perhaps how you heard of the movie, or was it just something that came about while you were browsing the internet, or you heard of a release or something?
Yeah, I think it's probably a release because we'll get into that a bit later on, but there are a couple of notable ones from labels that we follow. So I think it's probably popped up at some point on one of those. Yeah,
we'll get into the release information later on. So, having seen it before, I sort of knew what to expect. There were a few bits that I'd forgotten about because, like I said, I haven't watched the Horror Channel in quite a long time. The last time I looked at it, they were showing like Star Trek on there, like the original series, and I thought, this is different. Not that I mind that, of course, but it just didn't seem to be a great fit for a Horror Channel. I guess if you're going 24 hours, you've got to show something during the day. So I guess that's what they're doing. But Alice Sweet Alice, Tom, give us a little overview here of your initial feelings on this, and then we'll dig into the plot.
Yeah. It's a funny one because, it's not as well known as your sort of major slashers. And on the one hand, I can see why that's the case. But on the other hand, I think it's got some really good qualities to it, which are probably better than some of the films that are more famous than it. So it's a strange sort of mixed bag in a way. And I think, pacing wise and the situation it gets in, it's not your typical slasher in some ways, but it is in other ways. The way you find out who the killer is quite early on, really. not super early on, but probably earlier than is usual in these films. It is quite unusual, but it does have quite an unsettling vibe about it for several reasons. And one, you're dealing with the death of kids. A child dies quite early, and that's always unsettling. And, I'll get into a few more of the things as we go on, but it's a bit of a strange one in that, like I said, I can see why it's not more well known, but I also think that there's some real good qualities in this. So I'll leave it at that for now and maybe let you get into it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we have a habit of sort of telling people what we think of the movie at the very beginning before the actual review. And I suppose that's just the way the Strange and Deadly show goes. But I feel like we do that to kind of, load the ammunition in and then we fire the gun, so to speak. Very gun-related way of saying that, isn't it? But yeah, I remember having watched it on the Horror Channel thinking, oh, this is better than what a lot of the other stuff is, because they used to show some real crap on there.
Oh, it was awful. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, I mean, I was talking about, there was a film, Bloody Murder. I think they used to show Camp Blood, which was like this horrible slasher film about a clown, really poorly filmed and put together. I mean, I understand you've got to fill in the spaces where you can, but they did show a lot of crap on there. They may still do.
Just to butt in, because the early days of the Horror Channel, I was like you, and I was like, great, a Horror Channel, but it was just the worst dross ever. Occasionally you might get a half-decent film, but it was all that. There was a lot of that sort of digital, the new, really low-budget crap. But I think a few years ago now, someone took hold of it and said, right, we're not doing this anymore. And it did get a lot better. And they started playing recognizable films. There's probably still a bit of crap on there. But, and they really upped their game a bit. So, sorry, carry on.
No, that's good to know. I mean, when I first got into the Horror Channel, Emily Booth was nowhere to be found. She came in later as one of the hosts on that channel. So I suppose they were really kind of fumbling to find good content to put on there. And yeah, I do remember also that quite a few of the films were cut as well.
Yeah.
That's problematic for me because I like to see my horror uncut for the most part. I suppose also there was that feeling of, God, am I going to get to see some big movies on this? I'm going to get to see the likes of, your Friday the 13th, your Halloween, something like that, a Romero film. In those early days, certainly it didn't seem like anything like that was forthcoming. You were either going to get something like one of those brain damage movies that we hate, or you might get something like Alice. Sweet Alice, you might luck out. Another film there, Bloody Birthday as well, which I think I've got a Blu-ray copy of somewhere here, which was a kind of interesting cult movie about killer kids and would have fit this theme quite well as well. So, now and again they would show something kind of cool. And this is unsettling, isn't it? I would describe it as having just a slight bit of a giallo vibe to it. And we call it a slasher movie. You called it a slasher, and I would agree with you. This came out in 1976, Tom. So we're talking about, before Halloween, and I think just after Black Christmas, or maybe around the same time as Black Christmas. So this is kind of a proto-slasher, isn't it, in a way?
I never even put two and two together and thought of the timeline there. Well done. But if this predates Halloween, that really is quite significant, because we do have a masked killer, walking around mainly with a knife doing their business. So, yeah, that's quite interesting, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, now and again, Tom, one pops out. I don't happen that often. Most of the time it's nonsense, but now and again, I do make a semi-decent point. But yeah, so starting at the beginning there, of course, we meet the central characters that we're going to meet. We've got Catherine Spages, played by Linda Miller, I think is who plays her. We've got a young Brooke Shields, Tom, as a little girl, playing Karen there, who's the favoured daughter of the two. And you have Paula Shepherd, who's got a very interesting face for screen, I think. And it's probably worth saying right at the beginning here that she only made this movie and then one more, and then decided to retire from acting completely and go off and sort of have a family and never return to the profession again. Reminds me a bit of the young girl who played Newt in Aliens, did that one movie and then was never seen again, as an actor. It's an interesting thing. But yeah, we have this undercurrent, and I'm interested in what you think here, this undercurrent of Catholicism throughout it. Religion seems to play a part in the story, certainly as we get towards the end of it and we look at the killer reveal. Religion is a big part of it. Maybe that's what gives it a different feel to some of the slasher movies that were set to come, where it's very much about the body count. I don't know that this necessarily is about any kind of body count. I feel like maybe the Friday the 13th movies kind of encapsulated that, the idea that these movies are about a killer who comes in and kills a load of people, and how many people can he kill in the creative ways in which he or she can do it. Whereas in this, I do feel like there's an unsettling undercurrent of religion playing a part in why these events are occurring. And we see, of course, poor Brooke Shields, she doesn't get that much time to shine here before she's disposed of. And I want to ask you, Tom, about the costume of the killer, because you mentioned it there. You've got the yellow raincoat. It's really the yellow raincoat that reminds me of that has the Gialli feel to it for me. How are you feeling about the look of the killer?
Yeah, it reminded me more of Don't Look Now, although it's a different coloured coat, but it's a kid running around with its hood up. Similar kind of reveal at the end, I suppose. But yeah, it's very much a sort of slasher thing as well, isn't it? A mask, a certain look, a signature look. But, you mentioned the religious undertones to it, and I think you're right, as part of, there's several things that are kind of unsettling through it. There's the fact that, a child dies quite early on and then their body gets burned in a church. I mean, my God, I'm not a religious man, but still, I burn my bodies elsewhere, not in churches. I would never do that.
Me neither. Keep them in the basement.
Well, exactly, as a respectable person should. But there's also things like the, the landlord who has just got nonce written all over him, hasn't he? He is just like the skeeziest looking dude you've ever seen in a movie.
Stains on his stains on his underpants, stains on his trousers. Ugh, what a nasty man.
Yeah, just that grubby patch on the front of his trousers, and he's sort of leering at the kids, and you're just like, oh, vile. And it has this sort of strange washed out look to it, and I'd be interested to see one of the HD presentations, because we watched it on like Vimeo or something. So I'm not sure that was a particularly well looked after print, but it has this sort of washed out look to it. But I think there's some really effective sequences here as well. There's a guy climbing up the stairs later on, and the way the killer sort of comes out and stabs him really quickly. Just, some really effective stuff, I think. I
agree. I think, cinematography is really good. It's a competent, well-made movie. And like I say, perhaps it's just because I've seen so many Gialli over the years. I really do get some of that Italian vibe coming through. But I wanted to pick up on something you said, Don't Look Now. What a great point, because, it has got some of that feel to it. Don't Look Now is a fantastic movie, and it's quite hard to describe because a lot of it hinges on, a lot of people focus on the final reveal of Don't Look Now and kind of ignore the rest of the movie, but it has its own weird vibe to it. And I feel like this does share some of that. The killer coming out of nowhere. It does remind me, I keep going back to the Italian thing, but it reminds me of some of the Argento set pieces in which he would have, the killer would just suddenly appear out of nowhere, or a hand would appear out of nowhere and start stabbing at somebody. It's very similar to that, isn't it?
And throughout, we've got this sort of swirling score, this music. And I didn't find that particularly Italian, but just the use of it was quite similar. I do think that it reveals the killer quite early, and as you mentioned, it predates most slashers, so it's almost like it wasn't adhering to a formula, because I think if you made this 10 years later, that would be the final reveal, wouldn't it? That it was a grown woman and not a kid.
Absolutely. And I have to say, as somebody who, when I was in my teens, especially my sort of mid-teens, early to mid-teens, I went on a bit of a slasher kick. I've told you this before, but I drank in as many slashers as I could get my hands on, whether it was VHS tapes or coming into sort of mid to late teens, getting DVDs. I used to buy loads of stuff off of eBay. Some of them were blind buyers. I really got a kick out of slashers. And one of the things I didn't like is when they would reveal the killer too early, or they would really telegraph the killer. Like, you remember Friday the 13th Part 5, that guy, the guy who's like, one of the paramedics comes in, and then one of the kids says something about, one of the murders happening, and the paramedic leans in like, were you talking about the killer, were you? And like, it telegraphs who the killer is, like, the quarter of the way into the movie. I used to hate that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you can't be in. I don't think you can be annoyed by it here because, as we say, it was really Halloween and certainly Friday the 13th that kind of cemented that aspect of the slasher movie that then became a template for all these other movies that follow. This obviously isn't following that. It's a slasher movie, but it's very much of its own creation. But you're right, as we go through, of course, and leading up to what you were saying about the grown woman, you know, we're meant to believe that Alice is the one who was committing these crimes. I mean, did you ever feel that it was Alice who was committing them?
I thought it probably was, yeah. I really didn't know where it was going, which is to its credit. And I thought it was just a Kill a Kid movie, you know what I mean? That she was, because she's certainly got her issues, hasn't she, Alice?
This is the thing, isn't it, Tom? I mean, even if she's not a killer, there's some real behavioural issues there that have to be ironed out. And based on the ending shot of this movie, which we'll tell you in just a moment, she may be heading down a dark path anyway. So, you know, Alice was certainly not a stable person. I mean, even when her sister is murdered, and it wasn't by her own hand, she doesn't seem particularly bothered about it. In fact, Karen, the sister, played by Brooke Shields, of course, seems to be more of a thorn in her side because she's kind of the favoured one. So, yeah, it's she's not a great example of a teenager. And, you know, they give you that impression of her being the red herring because she's never around when the murders are taking place. Mm-hmm. And she's hiding out in his basement, and she's got herself, you know, a very handy killer costume as well, in addition to the real killer. So it's, you know, it's an interesting thing. But we have this whole thing throughout the movie of the mother not wanting to believe that it's Alice who's doing it. The aunt thinks she's the one who did it. Of course, the stabbing in the foot.
Yeah.
So she says that Alice is the one who does it. You've got the father coming in, them being estranged, within the mother and father kind of coming together. He gets a phone call, goes off to a warehouse, and then is attacked by the killer and ends up being killed by them. And at that point, that is when we get the the revelation. Now, did you have any sort of suspicions really about the housekeeper who, as it turns out, is the one who's committing the murders? She is very religious. She's, and as we discover later, very into Father Tom and is kind of overprotective of him and wants to kind of be only in his world, in this world of Catholicism, and to be loved and be treasured by him. And the fact that he has these young girls coming in who he's also very fond of, not in a weird way, but just, you know, is fond of helping, it's turned her into this violent killer. Did you have any suspicion about her? Because I have to say, I do have a memory of at one point I think it's Alice's father is talking about, is saying, and she can hear in the background him saying, well, I can't remember what the bloody woman's name now is, the housekeeper. Anyway, I think he mentions her name and says, well, she also had a yellow waistcoat and book that out. So maybe it could be her. Maybe it isn't Alice at all. And I remember the look on her face because she looks over there and kind of looks like a bit seedy. And I thought, you're the one. Did you have any feelings like that?
I never did. And I think part of it is because, and maybe it's my fault, when I was watching it, the first sort of 20 minutes or something, I did get a bit muddled sometimes. Like there was a couple of women who looked like each other. And you know, in that first part of a film where you're trying to like know, okay, who's who, who's this, who's that. And I think a couple of the women, I kept getting confused between like, who are the kids, both their daughter, is one from one woman and one the other. And I was just sort of trying to get hold of it. So there's probably a lot of nuance in there that I didn't get. But also I think I wanted to ask you about the acting, because while I think cinematography wise and the setups and this feeling of unease it has through it, I think the acting is fine in some cases, but there's a couple of quite shocking performances as well. The auntie, when she's in hospital after being stabbed, and she's keeps saying it was Alice, and she's just sort of shrieking for about 10 minutes, and you just want to say, shut up, woman, my God. And she was absolutely awful. So I guess I was distracted by things like that. What do you think of the performances, and I guess the performance of Alice as well?
Well, we've just learned a lot about your sexism, Tom. And now, shut up, woman, you bloody woman. How dare you shout for 10 minutes? Go and make my dinner. That's what you were saying.
If it had been a man, had said, shut up, man. You know, so I'm an equal opportunities shouter. I
thought you were going to say sexist there, and I'd have said, cut that out. But no, I agree with you, Tom. You know, some of it is pretty ropey, right, and kind of stilted. I mean, you have to get used to that, really, when you're looking at the Section 3 list. That unfortunately is going to happen. I mean, I didn't think that anybody was absolutely terrible. The aunt is very full on and obvious about things. I thought the lady who played Catherine, the mother, was pretty good. You know, I mean, how do you feel about Paula Shepherd, who played Alice?
I think she was good. You know, she could be a bit shrieky sometimes when she was talking as well, but there was a real good sense that there's a rage in this kid, you know what I mean? Which is why it was so believable that it could be her.
No, I agree with you for the most part about the acting. You know, I think everybody is fine. Nobody's putting in an Oscar-winning performance, but you wouldn't have expected them to. I do think, as I said, that Paula Shepherd had a pretty interesting kind of face for the screen, and it's a shame that she never really went on to do anything else. You can imagine her almost as being like a young Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, sort of starting here and then going from somewhere else. But it's actually Brooke Shields who's disposed of in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the movie, who ended up going on to have the big career out of all these people, I think. But it's, you know, I agree with you. I think that what kept me watching the first time I saw it, and indeed this time, is the vibe of it, the look of the killer, some of the kills. I mean, there's nothing that's super duper graphic there, but it gets the point across. I just think it's got a really strange, as you say, washed out, grindhousey vibe to it. Do you know what I mean?
I do, in that it has got all these sort of vibes going on. You know, it is quite unsettling, quite disgusting when we see the guy living in the building with them.
He's the worst. He's the goriest thing in the movie.
Yeah, you just wonder whether you're going to see him do something horrible at some point. So it does have that, but then, you know, it's quite a nice location in a way, and it seems to be all authentic where it's filmed. The cinematography is good, albeit sort of strangely washed out. So it's all over the place in really surprising ways. So it sort of sits in those two places, the grimy place, the unsettling place, and actually this is really good quality in some ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's far from perfect, right? It is, as you say, it's got some of that griminess to it. I enjoy that aspect of it, but it's certainly not all of it hangs together in the same way as, I mean, even something like Black Christmas, I think, is more accomplished than this is, but it also doesn't have the weird vibe that this one has and the weird killer. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, I wanted to ask you, do you think the pacing is a little bit off with this, in that it's about an hour and a half long? I do think it takes a bit too long sometimes to get to where it's going. Once we get the reveal of the killer, it takes quite a while for there to be any kind of finality to that side of that part of the story, for me.
I do think the pacing is a bit off. I think early on as well, I was like, come on, just get on with it. What have we got here? But I think I might be a bit more forgiving of that if I watched a nice Blu-ray version. Now I know what it is, and just sort of reevaluate it. You know, we spoke about the reveal of the killer and this woman, who I think was pretty good as well in her performance. And I think maybe that's why, that's one of the things that stopped it really going forward. It's what came after, and now this seems like a slasher that did it wrong, but it wasn't. It was doing its own thing, like we said.
You're right. I mean, I suppose it's worth saying that at this point that reveal happens about 20 minutes before the movie ends. It might even be a bit longer than that. 20, 25 minutes or so before the movie ends, we find out who the killer is. She kills off Alice's father. And then we have to go through the motions, so to speak, of her going to confession, speaking with Father Tom, getting an assurance from him that she is loved, that he's her friend, that he's gonna protect her, and she can confide in him. Yeah. And then, of course, it has to come to the point where she becomes so unhinged that they're able to eventually catch her. And it all leads up to this scene in the church where she's getting ready to receive communion, and the father doesn't want to do it, and she snaps and stabs him in the neck.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, didn't see that coming at all. But you have to get to grips with the fact that this isn't, I'm not saying you specifically, Tom, but I'm just saying anybody who's not seen this, who's used to the slasher template, you know, this isn't going to be Mrs. Pamela Voorhees at the end of Friday the 13th, where this is the ending of the movie, and now there's a little bit of a chase, and she gets killed. This is who the killer is. The mystery's now solved. Now we have to wait for the other characters to catch up, which feels a bit unusual, doesn't it, in 2019 when you're so used to slasher films not doing that.
That's right. But I suppose, to give it its credit, when the reveal happens, we love to spend time with our maniacs, don't we? When they're going about their day-to-day business and seeing that kind of undercurrent of madness that's going on. It's why we're both looking forward to seeing the new Joker movie. We didn't think we would be when it was first announced, but it seems to have convinced us from the trailers and so on. But me and you like to spend a bit of time with our killers, our maniacs, as they go through their day-to-day lives and try and contain that madness. So I enjoyed a bit of that as well.
Well, I don't know about you, Tom, but I find that when I watch a movie, I pretty much consider it, unless it's based on a true story, I consider it to be a work of fiction. And therefore, I don't believe that showing something that's perhaps a bit dark and unhinged in a movie means that we're about to experience the downfall of civilization. But it appears that some people do believe that, Tom. What can you do? The internet is what it is. To me, a movie is a movie, in the same way that when I go and play Batman or no, so if I go and play something super violent like Doom, or I go and play a movie where I'm or I go and watch John Wick 3, I don't walk out of the theatre thinking, God, I can't believe they're promoting guns. I suppose I should go out there and shoot people to death now because the movie's told me to do it. A bit of a rant there, Tom, but there it is. We do enjoy that. You look at films like Maniac, even Christmas Evil, which was part of this film. We do like to see a madman or mad woman becoming unhinged, because this is reality to some degree. That does happen in real life, but this is a movie. It's a movie. In real life, you and I aren't sitting there going, God, I'd love to be in the bedroom of a maniac and watch them going crazy. We're not saying that. But in the context of a movie, it's okay because it's fictional work, Tom. I don't know who I'm ranting at the moment, Tom. It's not you.
Let it out, mate. Let it out. Go on.
Let it all out. But yeah, it's so you've got about 20 minutes there, a block of 20 minutes where you slowly see this person begin to lose their mind if they haven't already. And then it all kind of culminates in that scene of at the church. I mean, is there anything you want to say about the ending there where she stabs this beloved father that she loves? I guess she feels she's desperate and she's unhinged. She has no choice but to stab him.
Again, like I said, I didn't see it coming. He didn't see it coming either, obviously. But it very much gels with the whole vibe of the film, in the sort of juxtaposition between the respectability of certain things about it. Wow, this is a good looking film. It's shot well, but it's also a grimy sort of slasher, proto slasher. So to have the ending in a church like that, where surely nothing will happen in a church, although something already has, and then it does, it kind of really fits with the whole vibe of it. So good ending. Yeah,
2 major incidents, 2 major murders in a church. So yeah, that's significant, I think. And I suppose really the undercurrent of that religious theme makes this movie stand out in its own way. When you consider this is probably a low budget affair, this is a lot better than those brain damage films, isn't it? People are actually putting the little amount of money they have to good use.
Yeah. I haven't really had time, but I'd like to see what else this guy directed, and is there any other notable films in there? We'll get round to that.
We will do, yeah. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. Of course, Tom, the final shot is Alice walking away, and she puts the knife that was used to kill the father in a bag, and there's a look on her face and there's a feeling that this has kind of set Alice off down a dark path, I think.
That's right. And if there was an Alice, Sweet Alice 2, then she would be the killer. So it is a proto Friday the 13th in a way.
Can you imagine that? They did like an Alice, Sweet Alice 6. And she's like, she's in the grave and then she gets resurrected with lightning. And she's like a zombie killer. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
It would invalidate this one, wouldn't it, though? That's the only problem, because as you know, horror slasher sequels tend to get sillier and sillier as they go on. But it's, Tom, give me your overview then of this, your summary, rather, of how you feel about Alice, Sweet Alice. It was a new one for you, and by all accounts, it sounds like you enjoyed this.
Yeah, I thought this was a good one. And I think it might be one that I would enjoy even more on a second watch. I'm not sure I need to own it, but I would like to see a Blu-ray, a nice cleaned up version of it and see what it's like. How much of that vibe is still there? Is it still as washed out as what we seem to watch? But yeah, a surprising film, a good quality to it, and to get that unsettling vibe throughout most of the movie is no mean feat in this sort of low budget world. So nicely done.
Yeah, and a bit of a proto slasher, and I pretty much agree with you entirely. I remember this standing out when I saw it on the Horror Channel amidst a sea of shite. This was one of the ones that kind of stood out as me going, yeah, this is a bit of all right, and I would like to see a HD version of it. And well, Tom, I can tell you about those HD versions because there are some that exist. Now, the one that's the easiest for us to get here in the UK is from 88 Films, of course, released a lot of different stuff. They released a Blu-ray version of the movie as part of their Slasher Classics collection. It was number 35, to be precise. I remember when they announced the Slasher Classics collection, you and I said to each other, right, we're going to buy every one of these. And we started looking at the lineup, and we were like, I don't know if I need to own Skeletons. I don't know if I need to own some of these, because some of them are, it's a loose classic at best. For me.
I don't even own any of them. I remember when they came out, and I like you said, I pre-ordered the first 3 or whatever. There's probably more.
5, I think it was, yeah.
And then just as the days went on, I was like, well, do I really need to own them? I don't think so. And they cancel on the whole thing, and I don't think I've ever bought one.
Well, I did. I bought the Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3.
Okay.
I've always had a liking of the original Sleepaway Camp trilogy, but other than that, no, I've not really seen fit to do that. Well, this version is still available, and it features a new 2K master. However, it appears that the definitive HD version of this film, and I'm not really too surprised by this, is the more recent release from Arrow Video. Unfortunately, this is a Region A locked release for America only. Boo! This Arrow Video release features a notably improved transfer taken from the original camera negative, as well as several featurettes, and is considered quite superior to the 88 release. I was looking at the Blu-ray.com forums for this, and everybody's pretty much in agreement that this is the one that you want to get. I saw some stills on Blu-ray.com. They sort of break down, the picture, the audio quality, the extras and things like that, and it looks pretty good. That's going to be the one that you want to get. Unfortunately, it does mean you'll probably have to have a multi-region Blu-ray player, which you can get in order to see that. I just find the region locking thing a source of immense frustration. Yeah. When you consider that, I don't know the ins and outs of it, and I don't know how it works, and I don't know how much it costs to make it that way. I just think everything should be region free. I look at I'm into 4K movies, 4K UHD discs, all of them are region free. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what it is. Wherever you buy it from, it will be region free, and it will work on the 4K player that you've got. And I feel like that should be. Why exclude other people? Maybe it's a licensing thing as well. Maybe they're like, well, look, we're not allowed these featurettes to be seen in England or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it is frustrating, isn't it?
The thing is, in this day and age, if you can't, well, I'm not saying us, but if someone can't buy that American release of something, then they will, if there's no British equivalent, then they will find a way to get it in terms of torrenting or whatever, So I think it's a case of people trying to protect their property, but it's actually having the adverse effect, People just end up torrenting it or copying it or something.
Yeah, 100%. It serves no purpose other than to exclude certain territories, and they're going to find another way to do it. If you're on the DVD train, you can get a DVD version of the 88 Films release. And if you want to stream it as well, it's available on Amazon Prime Video to rent or buy. I didn't actually check to see if that's a HD version of it. It'd be lovely to think that maybe the Amazon Video transfer is available to buy there. Now, a stream is never quite as good as a disc, but it's good enough, in my opinion, to give you, most of what you want to see. So perhaps check that out. So there you go, Tom. Alice, Sweet Alice. Not a surprise to me, but certainly a fun one to revisit. And I think one of the better films on this list.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, look, Tom, your favourite thing's coming up now, Dead Children. So why don't you tell us about them? as part of the second part of our double bill, I would say.
Certainly will. Our second film is called Dead Kids, released in 1982 and also known as Strange Behaviour, and it was directed by Michael Lachlan, and it stars Michael Murphy, Louise Fletcher, Dan Shaw, and a few other people you've never heard of. We open with the death of Brian, the mayor's son, who is brutally murdered by a fellow teenager. He is soon found hung as a scarecrow. As police begin to investigate, we meet policeman John Brady and his son Pete. Unbeknownst to John, Pete has taken an interest in a local college course that promises money for minor experiments. The experiments are being run by Professor Gwen Parkinson, who plays a tape of Dr. Lessange, who explains some of his research. A demonstration is made of a chicken being controlled by simple commands. Pete signs up for the course and then attends a party with his friends. However, one young girl and her boyfriend are soon assaulted by a masked figure. The figure murders the boy and attempts to murder the girl, though she manages to escape into a swimming pool and is rescued. The masked figure turns out to be one of Pete's friends, that wakes up the next morning having no memory of the incident. Peter takes a pill at the college under the guardianship of Professor Parkinson, who promises him increased intelligence. He meets a pretty young secretary at the lab named Caroline, and they begin something of a dating relationship. However, it appears the lab is not all it seems, and neither is Professor Parkinson. She eventually restrains Pete and injects him in the eye with a serum that will enable her to control his actions. She orders the death of his father John, who we come to find out was once associated with Lessange via his wife, who has passed away. John is suspicious of the professor and his lab. Now we know the truth. The lab is controlling young people and telling them to murder. Will John be able to unravel the mystery and save his son? We find out as he approaches the lab, shotgun in hand.
Well, then the last few weeks, she would stay up there late at night trying to finish her work. And one night, she didn't come home. So he went up there to find her. She was lying across her desk, all pale and unconscious, and she couldn't get her breath. And later at the hospital, we were all there. She said it was like she was drowning, and like somebody was smothering her. It took over an hour, and then she died. And your father just wouldn't believe the reports. You know, she had this history of asthma, but he wouldn't believe it. He always believed that there was a connection between Lessange and her death. Well, I moved away to Florida after that, and got a lot of letters from your dad. He was always trying to come up with something new. But nothing ever turned up, till now.
Okay, Chris, Strange Behaviour or Dead Kids, whatever you want to call it. Bit of an obscurity to my mind, at least, but what do you think?
An obscurity to mine as well. I'd not heard of this prior to us getting ready to discuss it and hearing that it was on the list. Strange Behaviour around kids, Tom. That's Gary Glitter territory.
This is like the third episode on the run that you've mentioned Gary Glitter.
Well, listen, I'm not advocating anything that he did. He's a horrible man, but he had a couple of good tunes, didn't he? Like he had a couple during the glam era. There were some good tunes there. You
can't deny him now.
You can't deny him that, you know, Rock and Roll Part 2, all the rest of it. I think that was one of his songs. I've got a friend actually who he'll never listen to this anyway. It doesn't matter. But for fun, he used to go around just playing, you know, that song, "Come on, come on," all the time to people to offend them. And it's like, God, what an awful man. That's strange behaviour in itself, isn't it, Tom?
Mm.
Do that sort of thing. God, what a scumbag. Why don't I hang around with him? I just want you to know that I don't advocate that sort of thing. So here we are, Tom. We've got Dead Kids. We've got Strange Behaviour. And a movie that a plot I didn't see coming, certainly. Interesting movie, this. I know Tim S. Turner from the butcher the name of it now. He's got a new podcast that it's a reboot of his old podcast. He used to be called the Bitter Bastard Nerdcast. Bitter Bastards, as Alan Partridge would say. It's now called The Beauty, the Beast, and the Bees, I think it's called. Couldn't have picked a longer name, Tim.
Snappy, very snappy.
Very I'm only joking. It's a good name. It's a good name, Tim. But he sort of messaged and said, I love Dead Kids. And he was talking about this. He wasn't making any kind of, statement. Anyway, I'm waffling. How do I feel about this? Well, it's an intriguing one. I'm quite intrigued by the plus of this. It's got elements of kind of sci-fi to it. I've got some real pacing issues with this one, though, Tom, that need to be discussed. And some issues with some of the actors and things like that. The basic idea of it is kind of interesting to me. I've always been a fan of sci-fi-ish horror, maybe even having a little bit of a Cronenberg kind of bent to it. And this certainly isn't anywhere near as accomplished as something like that. But some interesting ideas. I'll say that much, and then I'll go through it in more detail later. What say you?
I think we're on the same page on that part. There definitely some interesting ideas. And I always like this sort of Stepford Wives kind of thing where there's something going on, some experiment or something or other, and people are going out into the community altered. So it's certainly an interesting premise. And, for this to be going on in the school and, early on the kid gets an A and it's as a result of the experiments that he's doing and his teacher's dead surprised. So it's all very intriguing. Absolutely. I think I'm going to possibly upset old Tim, though, in that the pacing issues just killed it for me. Honest to God. Yeah. Really, really killed it. Any interest that I had, anything that it reminded me of or parts of the plot that made me think, oh, hello, anything that happened didn't last long because it just bored me silly. And it really killed it. And there's stuff to like here. Again, we have a few kills here and there, an intriguing premise, but it is just so all over the place in terms of the pace. And I just found it so boring. And I've showed my hand early there, but I really struggled with it. Honestly, I kept trying to stop myself reaching for my phone to just go on the internet or something. But it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. So I don't think your issues were as strong as mine, but I think you mentioned the pacing, so I think you definitely know where I'm coming from.
No, they are. Okay. Sure. The thing is, I'm fudging it a little bit because we don't often deal in absolutes right from the very beginning of a review.
Yeah.
We kind of stretch it out a bit. This is pretty dull, though, isn't it? I mean, it took me. I watched this. I rewatched Alice, Sweet Alice last night, and then I watched this morning. I had to pause it a few times, to be honest, and then come back to it. And it doesn't happen that often to me. And, it's not a case of length of the movie. The movie's just over an hour and a half long. You and I just sat through something that's very different to this, Avengers Endgame, which is over 3 hours long. And if a movie is interesting enough, it doesn't matter what the genre is or what the subject is. If a movie is interesting enough, you'll look past the length of it. You almost don't even think about it. If you watch one of the Lord of the Rings movies, you don't really think about the length of it because you're so enraptured by what's happening. And that doesn't really, even a horror movie, horror movies don't tend to be longer than 90 minutes, but sometimes they can be. And I've seen some that are pretty fascinating and can justify that sort of 2 hour length or whatever. This is only an hour and a half long, but it felt longer, I have to say. It felt pretty long. One of the problems I have with it is that one of the main characters in this, the young guy, Pete Brady, I just didn't like that guy as an actor at all. I really didn't. I found him really kind of vacant and uninteresting. And I remembered his face. He plays Billy the Kid in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Did you remember that?
I don't. I was more recognizing the other guy as Jimmy Olsen from the old Superman movies, the Christopher Reeve ones.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those character actors you've seen all over the place. Yeah, and somebody who's also involved in the writing of this and the producing of it went on to be pretty big as well. Maybe we'll talk about this towards the end of the review. But that particular actor, not that guy, but the guy who plays his son, I really wasn't invested in him at all. I found him, and I found a lot of this movie pretty clunky. in terms of his execution of things. It's got some really cool ideas there, and you think, if only you were nailing it, that would be great, but you're not. And that's the most disappointing thing about this to me, is that it's just very lumping in the way it goes about accomplishing what could be accomplishing some pretty cool ideas there. It could come together, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite for me. But the bare bones of the idea of it is pretty cool. You've got these young kids who are being essentially brainwashed, more or less, or controlled to kill other people in a very targeted way. So the idea of the killer being this random kid, and it could be any of these kids who decide to get involved in these experiments. I like that. The idea that it's not just a mysterious, man or something in the background lurking in the bushes. It's kids killing kids,
Yeah, I mean, there's several antagonists in it. It all depends on who's sort of all juiced up on whatever the thing is, I guess. But I think leading on from what you said, there's no real lead in the movie. And it's possibly supposed to be the long-haired kid, the son of the cop, or the cop himself, one or the other, or there's supposed to be the shared lead. But there's no focus. Now, sometimes people say, I need to identify with someone in a movie to like it, or I need to like someone. And I disagree with that. I just need to be interested in them. But it was just hard to be interested in anyone in this, because there was no one to really focus on. There was no sort of journey for anyone that you could at least jump on board with and take that ride. So it was so scattershot that I was just like, right, okay, so we're back to the sheriff now, and the guy's drinking all the time. And who's that woman again who explains all the backstory? And, oh, right, that's his new girl. And it's just, honestly, so poorly executed.
Yeah, it's, and I think the person who you're ultimately meant to invest in the most, or I should say the people you're meant to invest in the most, so the father, John Brady, and the son, Pete. But like I said, John Brady is fine. I mean, that actor I've seen, again, he's a very well-known character actor. I've seen him in lots of different things. The guy who plays the son, man, he was doing nothing for me at all. And it's because there's no real likability there. So why do I care if he has a bloody needle put in his eye? I don't care, I mean, I thought he was stupid to begin with when the female professor says to him, okay, well, I'm going to give you a pill that can make you super intelligent. And he just swallows it without he doesn't even ask if there are any side effects or anything. Like, well, is there a possibility that my brain will explode or something? Is there a patient information leaflet I can read that will just tell me what I might expect? He just swallows it. So he's stupid to begin with, the guy. I mean, you should have seen his dancing, Tom, in that. The worst dance scene I've seen quite a long time. What was going on there? This is supposed to be the 80s. You don't, those people got any moves? I can't even dance some. I've got 2 left feet. That's why when I go to a dance floor, I'm always just running around in a circle, 2 left feet. But I could dance better than that. So how can I trust a man who can't dance?
Oh, I don't know. That scene was a rare bit of light in the movie for me. The way they just all went nuts in the living room dancing. I was like, does anyone do that these days? Just all dance in their house? I'm not sure. But yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. But
no, and a coordinated dance as well. They all kind of locked into each other's movements for a minute, didn't they?
I don't know what to say on this one, man. I mean, that guy who played the evil doctor or whatever he was pretty good. He was pretty creepy. But, by the time he was revealed, I'd almost forgotten who he was and what the point of any of it was,
Well, you hear this mention of this Professor Lestrange, or is it Lestrange or Lessange?
Yeah.
You hear mention of him a few times, and you know that John Brady, the sort of the main detective or sheriff or whatever, whoever he bloody is. But do they even say that he's a policeman? We know that obviously he is, but these things aren't introduced in a way that solidifies what they're meant to be. So we only really find out about the Lestrange connection towards the end of the movie, and this information is imparted by somebody we've only met once before, which is his girlfriend. So it's like, okay, I guess that's a thing that has happened now. I mean, I didn't mind the female professor. She was perfectly fine in the role. Now, I don't really see the point of the relationship with the secretary girl. She doesn't add a lot to it apart from getting her face bashed against a window. There's not a lot of meat on the bone, really. And what is there is not, it just doesn't sell the main idea of the movie, which is this really cool idea of it, people being controlled. It just doesn't sell it in a way that is convincing or solidly told, I think. And when you haven't got, as you said, when you haven't got characters to really cling to, that makes it even more difficult. I mean, if you look at a film like Parasite that we reviewed on the last episode, that did have some characters to kind of ground it. I mean, nobody here was growing lemons.
It really could have used some lemons, definitely, and maybe some soup.
Just some good lemon and soup work we could have used. Demi Moore should have been this, Tom, but by then I think she was in her fledgling years. But yes, it really takes its time to get there, doesn't it? When it does get there, I wasn't that bothered about it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. When it gets there, you're just like, okay, fine, just get it over with. Put me out of my misery.
After you've watched it, you think, right, I'm glad that's over.
Yeah,
I'll never watch this again.
I've just wasted an hour and a half of my life.
Yeah, and I think when you're distracted and when you're allowing things to distract you from a viewing experience, that tends to mean that you're not really that into it. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens there. I suppose the big reveal really at the end of it is that Lestrange actually was still alive all this time and was wearing a mask or something for some reason. And then he tells Pete, who's been under his control, to kill his father. And Pete thinks of him as his father, so kills him. Doesn't kill his actual father.
You know what? I've just remembered. There's a scene early on, and I didn't understand what any of it was about at the time, where they unearth a coffin. And then they pull the coffin out and they open the lid and there's just like two femurs lying there in the coffin. And you're just like, but the music is like, dun, 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 as if you're like, oh my God, what does this mean? You know, as if it's some major revelation. But I was like, what does it mean? I have no clue what's going on here. And then later on, the dude turns up and he's got no legs. So that must have been the legs in the coffin. But I don't understand any of why that happened.
Well, he left his legs in the coffin, Tom. That's an easy explanation for you.
Right.
No, this is bollocks. You get right. This is, a lot of this is poo. And it's not that, I don't even think it's a bad movie. I just think it's a dull movie. And sometimes that can be worse than a bad movie, because at least with a bad movie, if it's really, really bad to where it's entertaining, then that's fine. But when at least be bad and entertain me. Don't be sort of mediocre and dull, because then you're not accomplishing anything there except to be interesting to Tim S. Turner.
Sorry, Tim.
Sorry, Tim. Tim knows I'm very fond of him. I think a lot of him, not in that way, but I think highly of him. But I don't know, Tim. I ain't feeling this one, buddy. I'm not feeling this one. I mean, it's rare for us to not go super into the plot of it, but we've kind of if they don't care about the plot, why should I?
Yeah, I don't know what the plot was. So
the plot is that there's bad guys who are doing controlled experiments, Tom, and then a kid who's not a very good actor comes in and kind of zombie, there's a word for you, zombie shambles his way through the rest of the movie, and then his father gets married to the girlfriend at the end of it, and then they all go, God, what a great life this is, bye, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's a movie for you. There you go. You don't need to watch it. I've saved you the time. So is there anything else you wanted to say about this, Tom, before I tell you about how you can get a copy of it? And I know you're going to be first in line.
Well, I've got a copy here. I will be destroying it presently, so no one else is exposed to it. But please go ahead.
Who made that? What studio made that copy that you've got there?
It is Hardcore or Hardgore. One of the two. Released
by Hardgore. Well, let me tell you about some other releases, Tom. Severin Films released their Blu-ray DVD combo pack of this film under the name Dead Kids in 2014. This is an American release, but it is region-free, Tom, so there's hope for you yet. DVDs were also released from Elite Entertainment and Synapse. Those also came out, with the Synapse one perhaps being easier to acquire. These are both American releases. Having said that, Tom got one from Hardgore. Was that through Amazon that you got that?
Yeah, it was like £1 or something. So, I don't feel too cheated.
Oh, well, that's all right then. Sell it for £2.50 on eBay, get a bit of profit, mate. That's why I'd sign it and say it's from one of the famous co-hosts of the Strange and Deadly show. You probably get a few extra quid banged on top of that.
Yeah, I'll put yours on as well. I'll just use my left hand.
No, I don't want to be associated with this, Tom. I don't want to be involved in this. It also appears that there hasn't been a UK release of the film to date. Now, I said that, but I don't know. Is Hardcore...
Yeah, that's a UK release.
Well, fuck myself then, Tom. Apparently there has been a UK release of the film. You can pick it up for £1, or just have a look on Tom's eBay account within the next week or so. And you can get a personalised DVD from the host of the Twilight Zone podcast himself, and that's worth a few quid of anybody's money, I reckon.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say on this one. We do have a bit of feedback, though. Should we get over to that?
Well, I can't be bothered now. Now that we've gone through that experience, what's the point of anything? But I suppose so. I hear it's from our good friend Andrew Roberts.
Let's get over to some feedback.
Howdy, Chris and Tom, it's Andy Roberts here again. Loved your take on the sci-fi films last time, and all the lemons, soups, and is she old or is she young jokes. On to this episode's films, though, on Killer Kids. We'll start with Communion, aka Alice Sweet Alice, or Holy Terror, depending on which release you have. Really interesting one, this. It's very similar to Cruising or Dressed to Kill, as a distinctly American take on the giallo genre. It keeps a good mystery going on as to the killer's identity, but for me, it reveals the murderer just a tad too early for my liking, but it certainly doesn't ruin the experience. The whole threatening feeling of the film's religious tones are consistent with director Alfred Soll's own experience as he was excommunicated himself. And it's also interesting that much of the cast is dominated by women, or more accurately, women in positions of power and dominance. Many of the male characters seem quite feeble by comparison, with the exception of the large Mr. Alfonso, of course, the only male character that actually stands out, who does, regardless, refer to himself as his pet cat's mommy. Alice's intense fear of not receiving communion and the killer's motivations, when revealed, are very indicative of the fear of religious judgment, and despite it not being too savage, the film still feels very taut and tense as a result. I believe that Linda Miller, who played the mother in the film, even turned up on set after having tried to attempt suicide, her wounds visible and all. The appearance of the killer is very effective too, taking the raincoat of primary colours inspiration from Don't Look Now, and the death scenes are also oddly reminiscent of the selective body injuries of Deep Red, where the violence occurs to relatable areas of the body for the audience. While it does have its nasty, violent scenes, it's also likely that some of the low-key elements are what irked the DPP, as we get a child strangled and burnt to death in the opening, a little girl is menaced in a sexualised fashion by Mr. Alfonso, and then subsequently his cat is picked up and shaken around cruelly. The distributor VCL had also released Phantasm and the cut version of Death Trap 2, both of which were fellow nasties, so it's possible that was to blame as well. On to the next one, Dead Kids, or Strange Behaviour as it's sometimes called. This is a rather bizarre Ozploitation flick from Australia and New Zealand, which can't easily be condensed into one genre. It's got some major slasher elements, some sci-fi elements, and it has more than a sprinkling of 50s sci-fi B-movie tropes, like drug-injecting mad doctors, Big Brother-style mind control, and huge adults-against-kids paranoia. And then a random prom night-like dance routine thrown in as well. Apart from its zany mishmash of genres, it's also pretty self-aware, and it even has a happy ending, strangely, which is almost unheard of for this type of movie. The killer's mask is a reference to Ed Wood regular Tor Johnson, and the murder of the guy trying to fix his car is rather disturbing due to the killer's eerie silence and psycho-influenced knife stabbings. Surprisingly, the film was memorable enough to be remembered by Ridley Scott, who modelled Rachel's hairdo in Blade Runner after Fiona Lewis's Gwen character in this movie. It's a bit like a David Lynch film on ketamine. The characters are odd, the visuals and logic are a little surreal, and the tone and the setting shift wildly all over the place. But it's most likely the scene of eyeball injection and the suicide via knife, along with the rather provocative Dead Kids title, that got this attention from the police. In addition, an alternative title to the film was Human Experiments, which was one of the bona fide video nasties. And it was released by Ivor Film Services, who released other nasties like Bloodsong, Christmas Evil, Graduation Day, Night of the Bloody Apes, and Night of the Demon. So clearly there was plenty to frown at if you were anti-video nasty. But beware of DVD BBFC copies in the UK, however. It's missing a 40-second scene of wrist slitting, as they still have an issue with imitable suicide techniques. It's uncut and region-free from the US in a DVD Blu-ray combo, so get that one if you can.
Or don't get it. Don't get it, just leave it, because no one really needs it. Night of the Bloody Apes as well. Bloody Apes. Chris, it was an Australian film. Who'd have thought? I had no idea.
Does he mean that some part of it was shot in Australia? I mean, these actors don't seem to be Australian to me. I thought they were all American. But the most important thing to take away from... Thank you very much, Andrew, by the way, for your feedback. The most important thing to take away from that is that you're missing 40 seconds there, some of a wrist slashing scene. I think that would have improved the film for you if that had been in.
Maybe that's the missing link. It's like Jenga. You pull that out and the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. But I would like to say, by the way, thanks, Andrew, for your feedback. Where's the rest of you, eh? What's going on here? Why is there only Andrew here? I can forgive Gorblimey because he's a busy man. He said he's got some work and things to do. I understand that. Just about. He's got a pepper farm, Tom, a chili pepper farm. He's got red hot chili peppers to take care of. I'll forgive him. Where's the rest of you? Hey, you think I like coming in and doing this? No. You think I want to do this with the world's leading authority on Rod Serling? I don't want to be here, but I come here for professionalism. I do it. Where's your feedback? Hey, get on the bloody mic, pull your finger out, get on the mic and send some feedback. You know, what's happened to the world, Tom? Nobody can be bloody bothered anymore. What, are you too busy listening to the last podcast on the left? Or, what else is out there? Bloody Sword and Scale. Hey, too busy listening to that to send a recording to us. Hey, you should be bloody ashamed of yourselves.
I think Gorblimey was here in spirit, though, because some of the stuff Mr. Alfonso was saying was kind of like the stuff Gorblimey says, so at least there was that.
He can watch that and then add that to his stand-up set, Tom. He sends in. I said to him on Twitter a while ago, I said, well, at least you actually prepare your material. I just come on here and say a load of nonsense and hope that it's figured out in the edit. We come back to it later. Most of the time it isn't, Tom. You just leave it in and let me be exposed to the universe.
People love it. People love your shit, so don't worry about it.
In fact, you have to call it shit, Tom. Just because you go to this fancy meetup in September doesn't mean you have to be able to be. I'm coming. I'm coming, mate. I'm going to be like, did you ever see Keeping Up Appearances? The comedy with Hyacinth Bouquet. You know when Onslow would turn up with his dirty vest on and everything, and I can imagine you being there. And just be like, oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rod Serling meeting. It's so lovely to see you. And then all of a sudden you just hear, oh, dear, who's let that miscreant into the building? And you'll have to come by and be like, I'm so terribly sorry. Crispin, get the fuck out of here. I'd say that the scumbag is gone, everybody. The scumbag is gone. Thank you. We will now consider talking about Rod Serling once again in my presence. That's what's going to happen. All right. Anyway, we're done with our comedy bit now, Tom. I'm sure everybody's just laughing up in the air. Oh, God, the Strange and Deadly Boys. What great patois they have between this. But it's time to go, guys. It's time to go. That last film's burned me right out. Let's leave you be for a bit, Tom. Oh, I did want to say, by the way, just one quick thing that Bill Condon, who was a co-writer on this and also producer on it, has actually gone on to have quite a big directorial career. Mm-hmm. On that, when I say on this, I mean on Dead Kids. Do you know this, Tom? He went on to do Gods and Monsters.
One of my favourite films. I love Gods and Monsters.
Yeah, he did Dreamgirls with Eddie Murphy. He did the last two films in the Twilight Saga, so it doesn't all go well. He did, films like The Fifth Estate, Mr. Holmes. He did the Beauty and the Beast remake with Emma Watson. So, yeah, you can start here and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'll just mention it before we go. I mean, there is this new app called FlickChat because I'll be honest, Chris, I hate Twitter at the minute. It's horrible. I kind of stay on it for a select few people, but it does this annoying thing where, like, if a couple of your mates are following someone, then it just starts putting their tweets in your timeline and you're like, even if they don't like them. So it's just a fucking mess at the minute, Twitter. And it's just where humanity goes to plonk its anger and its hate. although I've done a bit of that in this show. So I can't be arsed with it anymore, but Flick Chat, it's a nice little app. It's only about the Strange and Deadly show. If you want to come on it, I will put a link in the show notes. So if you go to the website, strangeanddeadly.com, and click on that link, it'll take you straight to our group and you can join it if you just want to have a little chat, because I think as time goes on, I'm going to be on Twitter less and less. Yeah, there you go. So Flick Chat, better than Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have spoken for a long time and many times about the state of social media, the state of some of the people on it, without choosing to name any names. You know, there's a lot of people who are just upset about things all the time for the sake of it and for making themselves look good and things like that. And I'm not going to go into any more detail, but it just is. I'm at the point where I'm like, this is not why I signed up to social media. When you and I first met on Twitter back in, I guess it was 2007, 2008, somewhere around there, it wasn't like that. It was myself, you, Rachel, Lips Tattoo, or Hockey Punks as she's known on Twitter now, who's we just used to talk, and Chris Brown was on there with a few other people, Danny Davis, people like that, and we just used to talk about horror films. It was really nice.
Yeah, it was a chat room of your own making, because you would choose who to follow, so that's all you saw the tweets of. And now Twitter wants you to follow more people, so it's putting stuff from other people in your timeline, and it's just exposing you to all this shit from people you don't even follow. So yeah, I can't stand it.
Yeah, there's a lot of I'm really annoyed by this thing. Why are you annoyed? Don't know. Just what you do, isn't it? Yeah. Really? Or I'm really safe and great and I'm better than everybody else in the world and you can trust me because I'm one of the ones who's not like them. And it's just like, and there's a lot of cancel culture and things like that going on. Not to be too dark about it or not to get into too much detail, but somebody just committed suicide in the gaming industry. Yesterday, I think it was announced, because of accusations that weren't necessarily proven. And you just think to yourself, I actually sent a tweet out last night where I said, wow, this platform has become really dark and twisted. Like, people are ready to just destroy you. Yeah. And they don't even know you, that they just happen to believe something without looking at any of the facts of it or whatever. So it's yeah. In other words, come to the Flick Chat and avoid That's it. So, Tom, look, we've had fun. Well, we've had fun with one film and we've not had much fun with the other one. What about on the next episode? Because we are now, after we've done, I can't remember if it's this next episode or after that. We're only about 6 episodes away from finishing this list, so we're getting close. What have we got up next?
Okay, another 2 films I've never heard of, The Black Room and The Toy Box. So the theme is erotic/murder. We had an erotic episode a while ago, didn't we? But this is another one, so I can't wait.
Oh, Tom, I'm going to get my little wiener out and helicopter it around while I run it back and forth to the mic and away from it, all excited about the eroticism that you and I are going to enjoy together. There's going to be loads of references to your penis and stuff, all the stuff you love. We're going to do all of that there. And so it's an erotic murder sort of theme. And there's a story I have to tell you about the film. I think it's The Toy Box. That is quite remarkable, really. In searching for that film, I found something I didn't want to find. So I'll tell you about that on the next episode 37 indeed, of The Strange and Deadly Show. So until then, I've been Chris Clayton.
And I'm Tom Elliott.
And we'll see you on the next one. And make some bloody effort to send some feedback in, your shit.
You've been listening to The Strange and Deadly Show. Music by Danny Davis, artwork by Darking One, and presented by Chris Clayton and Tom Elliott. To listen to the back catalogue or to check out other shows on the network, please visit strangeanddeadly.com.